Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your habits, your network, and more. My name is Aaron Hayslip. I am one of your hosts. And today we're talking about how to go from newbie to software engineer this year. This is a talk I used to give all the time back in the day when I ran in-person code school. We ran a meetup group that had a couple thousand members in Durham, North Carolina. And I want to come back to basics. So if you are listening to this podcast for the first time, or if you've never written a line of code and you're thinking, hey, is this career change to becoming a software engineer possible? If it is, what does that path look like? This is the episode for you. All right, let's start off by setting the stage here. I imagine that you're somebody who maybe you've never written a line of code. You have a current career path, or maybe you've just graduated college, or you didn't go to college. Likely you're considering a career change to becoming a software engineer. And for good reason, right? You see the industry, and maybe right now you saw some layoffs from big tech companies. But besides that, and maybe that's a question you have, which we'll answer too, is this career still viable? But you're probably in a position where you're thinking, wow, I can make more money. I can work from home. I can do something I love. I can work in tech. The benefits are amazing. And they really are. And some of the big tech companies, if you've got a handful of years of experience as a software engineer, yeah, you can make $200,000 in base salary, $200,000 plus in stock options, and then all these other insane benefits. So that's real. I don't want to make you think that you're going to do that in the next 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 months. But after a few years of work, like that's the reality of what software engineers are making. So that's probably pretty appealing to you. And so you're thinking right now, hey, my current career trajectory, regardless of what that might be, might have a dead end for a number of reasons. And this doesn't always follow income. We've seen students come through who, yeah, maybe they're teachers, right? And their income is capped, and they'll never be able to make more than $45,000, $50,000 a year. We've seen folks from ministry, pastors, who are in a similar boat where, hey, the most they can ever make is $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 doing pastoral work or nonprofits or ministry or whatever. And that's real. I've also seen lawyers, though, who are making $250,000 a year and are just so burnt out of working 80-hour weeks, being a lawyer, whatever that means. To be honest, I've never been one, so couldn't tell you what the job entails. But regardless, I think it's a good thing to think through is why not be a software engineer? Now, obviously, I have a ton of caveats of not everyone, and I always say this, by the way, not everyone should become a software engineer. I think everyone can, right? It's not, and as arrogant as we can be sometimes, and we want to think that we know everything and that coding is some kind of special power, I think everybody, regardless of your background, you've got the capacity to learn how to program. It's not any more difficult than anything else. In fact, I was the worst in school. Well, the worst in school, not period. I was like a B, C student. So not great, but I was terrible at math. Like the highest level math course I took in college was a course called college math. And it was literally, why math is good. Well, you can, do your budget with math. And if you're going to go into finance, you should learn math. So anyways, I'm not the stereotypical computer science, math, science person. And I learned to program, and it's not that difficult. It's extremely frustrating in the beginning, but anyone can do it. That being said, I don't think everyone should do it, and we'll go into that here in a minute. But I want to start off by first diving into, I want to just put all the cards on the table and give you a picture of the most common path. So regardless of whether you should or what you need to make sure that you've got together before you start this journey, we'll go into that in depth here in a minute. What is the most common path for people to go from your position right now of not knowing any code to then becoming a software engineer? Now, obviously, I've got a caveat, and we'll go into that too, which is there's a lot of paths, right? There's no one size fits all. But the thing I always come back to is how many of the paths where people have taken to become a software engineer, how many of those are prescribable and repeatable, right? For example, I've got friends who absolutely started in customer support at some tech company slowly went into technical support, then they were doing some coding, and then eventually became software engineers. And that's just what they are now. They're software engineers. Like, do they have to pay for it? No. Was it hard? Not really. It just took a lot of grinding and being in the right place at the right time. I can't prescribe that to you, right? I don't know how to find one of those jobs where they would let you just sort of apprentice and then eventually make you a software engineer. That's not a prescribable path. So what I'm going to give you is the most common path. Man, I can't talk. The most common path to becoming a software engineer, which is obviously through a coding boot camp. And I know we've probably heard all the horror stories of coding boot camps, and they're real. And probably every coding boot camp that's ever existed has a handful of horror stories. You're going to find those for sure, because the variety of experience that happens in a coding boot camp, and even boot camps that I've started before, there's definitely horror stories because the experience isn't always consistent across every single student that's ever come through. So that's an admission. That being said, it's still going to be the most viable, repeatable, prescribable path is to go through a coding boot camp eventually. But I have some caveats for that. So let me start off with that, giving you the most common path, the best path that you could take through a coding boot camp to getting a job as a software engineer. And that is, obviously, you come into a boot camp that doesn't allow you to be fresh and green, right? You go to a a coding boot camp that requires you to take an admissions code challenge, right? So they know you can code coming into the door. And there's a few reasons why I think this is should be required of any boot camp that you look at. One is that boot camp is going to be able to teach you more advanced stuff. Obviously, like they're not going to be teaching you how to like declare variables or style, turn a box red or something, or even use the computer or terminal. You should come in already knowing the basics of all of those things. That way you can dive right into, design patterns and learning the more complex issues that beginner developers need to learn. Also, this is a filtering device, right? Not everybody should learn to code, and not everyone's prepared yet to go through a coding boot camp. So if you can't pass a basic code challenge in a language like JavaScript, then you're just not ready, right? And maybe it's not for you either. So we're going to dive into that here in a minute as well. So all this means that before you even consider a coding boot camp, you learn the fundamentals of a programming language. I think that's the best place to start. I'm kind of going through these quickly, this overview, then we'll dive in deep here. But so I think, learn JavaScript, learn the fundamentals. Don't need to feel like you need to build an app first, or learn React or learn a framework. Just be able to know all the fundamentals of a basic language. And we actually have an episode on this. So if you actually go back to episode 9, it's a complete guide to learning JavaScript. That will give you a great overview of all the things that I think you need to learn before you're ready to consider even doing a coding boot camp. And this isn't a plug, but it's totally a plug. We have a course that helps you with this. It's called Dev30, DEV30.xyz. That's our 30-day JavaScript course. It's literally designed to prepare you for a coding boot camp, specifically ours. Plug. But you don't have to take ours. You can go through Dev30 and do whatever you want with your life. That's fine. So anyways, that's that. Through the coding boot camp, obviously you need to be the kind of person who is like just killing it. You're on top of the ball. Doesn't mean you won't hit road bumps, you won't get frustrated, etc. But you should be able to manage your time, right? That's a requirement of a functional adult, is to be able to manage your own time, to work hard. You need to be building projects all the time. And I will say towards the end of the program, you need to be able to start thinking about how to build real projects, things that are, viable and realistic. And then after the program, you need to then suddenly switch into, this is horrific sounding, but you need to become a networker, the kind of person who has the confidence to reach out to people, initiate relationships, and it's sort of a grind to get that first job. I'll be honest, it's not an easy process, and it's not straightforward. And it's not that way at any boot camp. Maybe early on in the early days of boot camps, it was, where there were so few boot camps. They were a novelty. Boot camps had relationships with companies who hired all the time from them. That's not necessarily the case anymore these days. It doesn't mean that it's less viable. It's just less straightforward. You have to really become a networker. Like, you have to think like a career changer. So that's a process, and it can be a grind, but it can be incredibly rewarding too. I mean, we saw a student recently who, I mean, it took him months. It really did. It took him months to find his first job, but $120,000 starting salary. That's not how it always is. That's like a really high starting salary, especially for, I'm in Texas. So in the South here, maybe San Francisco, that's pretty normal for a boot camp grad. But who wants to live in San Francisco these days? Am I right? Okay. That being said, that's kind of the overview. Like, that's super basic, right? Just go through coding boot camp. Kind of. But how do you do that well? Because you probably hear plenty of stories, and I know of a lot of these stories, where people who honestly have no business considering a coding boot camp, or boot camps who have no business calling themselves a boot camp. To be frank, they blow up someone's life because someone thought they were going to go into this thing that wasn't what they thought it was, or that they were prepared in a way that they weren't prepared, or their expectations were misaligned. So that being said, I want to talk to you about going through this path the right way. But before I do that, a couple quick words on a few other paths that people might be considering. And I want to just give some commentary on those paths as well. So one of the paths being, and I think the other two most common paths are, one, self-taught, or two, like computer science degree. And so let me start with computer science degree first. If you're already an adult with job experience, maturity, the things that you should have to be competent at a, big person job, then I don't think you need to go back to school to get a computer science degree. Honestly, no one really cares besides for your first job. And the first job is going to be hard to get, but after that, it's your gravy, right? You don't need to show your credentials to prove yourself. It's not about what you say you can do. It's about what you can actually do. And coding is a skill, so it's incredibly easy to show someone that you know what you're doing rather than showing them a certificate. In fact, even if you have a degree, that wouldn't count for much. That might get your foot in the door, but if you still can't code, which, by the way, most computer science degrees don't teach much in terms of practical learning. It's a lot of theory, because a computer science degree is not a software engineering degree. It's a general computer science degree. You could go into 100 types of jobs with a computer science degree. It's not designed to become a software engineer. So I think if you're not already in school, you're not already paying for college, going into super debt, like Mondo debt, right? To go to a 4-year college to get a computer science degree is going to be a waste of time and money, because you could spend that time searching for a job and becoming a software engineer and making money and not going back to school. And by the way, I've seen people who, after they become software engineers, they want to then get their computer science degree, which do that. Like I would prefer that you go that route, because it's going to save you a lot of time and money. So that's one. Wouldn't do that. Self-taught. I think everyone should start off with a mindset that they're going to be self-taught, right? The self-taught mindset that then gets the assistance of like a boot camp or some mentors is the winning ticket. But I've rarely, I started my first coding boot camp 8 years ago. I've met, I think, 3 people during that time who have intentionally gone from, hey, I'm a complete beginner, I don't know any kind of code, to I'm a full-time software engineer on their own. And all of them had some kind of insanely unique situation where they were able to devote, 6 months plus of like full-time capacity to learning how to code on their own. In other words, like the path is longer and less straightforward, right? So you pay for, you don't pay for like a school or something. You probably have to pay for some kind of curriculum, but you pay dividends on the time it takes you to make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes, then reassess and go back out there. So in other words, it's probably just going to take you a lot more time, and your success rate will be greatly diminished. So I say you take on the mindset of, I'm going to teach myself how to code, and you go for it with learning the fundamentals of JavaScript. But, that's kind of my assessment of teaching yourself how to code and going like the self-taught path. All right. That being said, I've got a path that I recommend. You've heard me out. You either agree or disagree. That's fine. Let's talk about the details now. Like, let's back up and think about hey, is this a viable career? I've seen lots of layoffs online. Should I even consider this, first of all? And then if so, like, how do I know I'm the right fit or I'm ready to start going down this path? All right, we've talked about this at length before, but the question of, is this viable? Like, can I actually get a job as a software engineer? I'm seeing, Meta lay off all these people, or Amazon. And I'll continue to say that, yes, it's a viable path, right? If you think about the next 3 to 5 years, or even year, software engineering isn't going away, right? Tech replaced the biggest industries in the world in the last 15, 20 years easily, and it's not going away. You can have the AI conversation, that's fine, but let's be realistic, software engineers aren't going away. They're going to be needed more and more and more. What you're seeing is the burn off from COVID. Now, if you don't remember this, let me remind you that during COVID, all these companies had insane spikes in their stock market value. They had a ton of freely available cash with extremely low interest rates. They hired everyone they could across the world because everyone was remote. So they're kind of just burning that off right now. And it's really just the big companies that you see doing this. So by and large, we're not in a recession. Employment is still at all-time highs. It's insane. We have got a very resilient economy, despite the fact that the feds keep raising interest rates. Now, I'm no economist, so don't take my advice as financial personal advice, but I think this is still a very viable industry, even if, right now it's going to take you a little bit longer to find that first job. So Peter and I have talked about all this at length in the last few episodes where we've done together, so go back and check those out. But the question you need to ask yourself is, are you the right fit for this? And again, I go back to these ideas of maturity. Can you focus? Do you have an abundance mindset? Do you have the ability to manage your own time? If you don't, right, if you're still kind of figuring yourself out in some ways, which I think is where you're probably going to be if you're changing careers anyway, but you need to know. And this is why back in the day, whenever we used to do in-person boot camps, and we did in-person interviews, actually, one of the questions I would always ask is, tell me about some large thing that you accomplished. And, college is probably a cliche example of this, but completing college is important because it means somebody has the ability to endure something for a number of years, and, manage their own time and accomplish something. So you want to make sure you have some kind of a track record of being mature. And two, you need to like coding. And everyone hears this. You're probably not going to like it at first, to be honest, because reality is we like what we're good at, right? I've got a 9-year-old son, and he will not play basketball because he's not immediately good at it. There's just a lot of things he won't do if he's not immediately good at it. And I think that's probably most of us. We don't like doing something that we suck at. So you're going to suck at coding in the beginning, and you may not like that, but you have to be able to find something in that process that you enjoy. And for a lot of beginners, it's slamming your head against the wall, slamming your head against the wall, slamming your head against the wall, and then getting a win. And that win just feels so good that it fuels you through the next, wave of hitting your head against the wall. This is also where you should get help, right? Doing a course like Dev 30 will be helpful for you, because if you get stuck, there's someone there to help you get unstuck. And there's nothing more frustrating when you're learning to code than getting stuck and not having a way forward. So you have to be able to have a vision for what you want to do with your life. As far as being a software engineer, you have to be okay with tinkering, and you need to be able to endure frustration, right? And so going back to that vision piece real quick, meet with other software engineers. Ask them what their life is like. Now, for me, I'm going to give you like a real transparent version of my story, which is I was parking cars at a Honda dealership for $9 an hour. That's the only job I could find when I graduated college with a religious studies degree. But then I have these friends who got computer science degrees at UT, the University of Texas here in Austin, and they were working at these amazing startups making, comparatively bukus of money. And I was so jealous, and I had so much regret for not trying harder or doing something different in college. And that's when I, of course, went through a coding boot camp, and then soon enough, I had that same job. And so when I got there, though, like then my vision changed. Like after about a year of working as a software engineer, I realized, wow, I have a lot of other skills that I feel like are not being utilized, right? I want to do something else. And that's when I started my first boot camp. All that to say, you don't have to come to this conclusion first, right now, that the thing you want to do with your life for the rest of your life is sit in a chair and write code. All you need to know is like, what's the next step? And this might just be a next step for you. And I think a lot of people are hindered from taking a next step because they think they need to figure out the next 10, which is where in reality is like your multi-step plan almost never works because the other few steps change as you change and evolve, as your circumstances change, right? So I never would have thought I would be doing the things I'm doing right now when I was in college. Like it wasn't even on my radar, right? And so you need to leave room for that. So even if this isn't what you want to do forever, you can still step into it. I would say though, if you're only motivated by, man, my life is going to be plush, I'm going to drink beer all day and sit on my computer and do whatever I want, that's not this life either. You've got to have a love of problem solving, a love of tinkering, sitting down for a long time, figuring out how something works. That's what coding is. It's testing things out, doing research, problem solving. That's cliche to say problem solving, but really is. You've got to be able to tinker. If you're one of those people who just wants to know the answer right out, you never ask, well, how does this work under the hood? Like what's actually happening? Then this is not going to be for you. You've got to get in that mindset. I think there is a way, by the way, to train yourself to getting that mindset. And I think we've even got some episodes on it. I think that's going to be episode 25. Anyway, don't quote me on that. So yeah, that being said, those are things I recommend for someone who's considering learning to code. Is you got to keep that in mind, that this is going to be ultimately on you. The boot camp's going to be there to help, but it's going to be on you to determine whether or not you have what it takes, the mindset, the abundance attitude, the capacity to be mature, manage your own time, the desire to tinker. Those are all going to be foundational, characteristics that you should have. That being said, when in doubt, just start, right? You don't need to have this all figured out. There's no assessment you need to take. You just need to start. So the place I always tell people to start is start by learning your first programming language. If you don't know which language to start with JavaScript. Now, this is not the same advice as learn HTML and CSS. Don't do that first. I mean, you could do that, that's fine, but don't use that as an assessment to tell you whether or not you like coding. Because HTML and CSS is not necessarily coding. It's a markup language. So you're going to build the structure of a website and then make it pretty, right? That's HTML, building the structure of the website, making it pretty, CSS, formatting it. Those two things are not programming languages. They don't have logic. You're not controlling the flow of a program. With JavaScript, you are, right? You're creating functions. You have conditional statements. You've got an array. You got arrays. You have objects. Which, if you learn the fundamentals of all of those things in one language, you're going to be golden for learning another language. It's going to be so much easier. So don't jump around. Pick one language and stick with it. Learn all the fundamentals of that language. Again, I referenced that episode that we do on the complete fundamentals of JavaScript. Learn that. That's the first place to start. And there's 100, there's 1,000, thousands probably, of resources online to learn JavaScript. Go to Codecademy, go to Udemy, go to YouTube, buy a book, whatever it is you want to do. We've got the Dev 30 course, but there's 100 ways to learn how to program the fundamentals of JavaScript. If you get through that and you feel good, then now you're probably ready to start looking at coding boot camps. There are, again, so many of these around in the world. My basic thought is none of them are going to be that much different. I caveat that by saying, like, if they make you take an admissions code challenge where you actually have to program and it's challenging, then like that's a good thing. Everything else is probably going to be okay. Like the curriculum itself is going to change from boot camp to boot camp. The individuals, the people, the feel, all of those kind of things are going to change. But, by and large, you can't really go wrong if the boot camp has lasted several years and has a good reputation. So that's more or less my advice there. And then, of course, you'll have to get into the networking piece as you get on. But that's not what we're going to cover. Obviously, in this episode, we've got entire episodes on that. Specifically, check out episode number 8, which is a little outdated. It was back in 2021. If you want a more up-to-date episode on job searching, check out a more recent episode that we just did, which is episode 78 with Megan Diaz. She is our resident career coach at Parsity. That being said, this is a super basic intro to the things you need to think about, but I think this is going to help you get the mindset and start evaluating whether or not this is something you want to pursue, because it's going to take you hours and hours and hours. You'll have to sink in a good chunk of your life. You'll get frustrated. But whenever you get to that point, I think I'm just basically giving an overview of episodes to listen to. Whenever you have finally decided that you want to start going for this, definitely check out episode number 4. These are strategies for how to focus when learning to code, because focus is going to be one of your biggest barriers because when you're doing something hard, especially nowadays, like we don't have brains that can focus for more than a few minutes at a time. That's just not who we are these days because we're so distracted. So check out that episode. It will give you some strategies for making this a priority in your life. Definitely learn the fundamentals of JavaScript, and then come back here whenever you feel good about JavaScript, and we will continue to point you in the right direction to landing your first job and then beyond, because that's just the beginning. You can kind of go from anywhere once you've got the skills, you're in tech, you're making good money. There's a lot of places that you can take your life from there. So excited for you to be part of this journey. Please let us know if there is anything we can help with. And thanks for listening.